Good morning and welcome to the Mini Storage Messenger Self-Storage Webinar Series. I'm Poppy Behrens, publisher of MiniCo Incorporated, and we're delighted to have you in the audience today. This is one of several informative webinars planned for self-storage owners, operators, managers, investors, developers, and other industry professionals. The sponsor of today's webinar is San Antonio-based Crossmetal Buildings, a Parham Group company, and our presenter is Donna May, president of Crossmetal Buildings. Donna has been in the self-storage industry since 1996 when she joined the Parham Group. She is the past president of Joshua Management, a real estate broker, and has a BA degree in business. Donna has also been a partner in several startup self-storage projects. Recognized in Women in Self-Storage and Women in Construction, Donna has also been a contributing author, convention speaker, and presenter for Learn Self-Storage. This year marks the 30th anniversary of the Mini Storage Messenger, the original voice of the self-storage industry. Each issue of Messenger provides readers with in-depth news and information. It covers stories and features which explore the most timely industry topics and trends. In addition to monthly columns and features, we also present a wide variety of Messenger industry news. Mini Storage Messenger is also now available in a digital edition. We also publish a variety of other self-storage data sources, such as the ones you see listed on your screen. For more information, please visit ministoragemessenger.com. This webinar is being recorded and will be available for viewing on demand from our archives at ministoragemessenger.com. We invite you to submit questions throughout today's webinar. To do so, simply type your question into the question area and click Send. While we will try to answer as many questions as we can during the Q&A period at the end of the webinar, those that cannot be answered due to time constraints will be answered by way of email after the webinar. Today's presentation should run about 45 minutes, with the remainder of the hour open to questions and answers. And now it's my distinct pleasure to turn the presentation over to one of my favorite people in the industry, Donna. Good morning, Donna.
Good morning, and thank you, Poppy. I'd like to thank the Mini Storage Messenger magazine for offering this webinar, and I'd like to thank each and every one of you for joining me today for this discussion on self-storage mistakes and how to avoid them. It looks like my keyboard isn't working, so I'll switch to the mouse. Should be coming up any second. There we go. Looking at the big picture, what is the most damaging and costly mistake in self-storage? Should be coming, there we are. The most damaging and costly mistake in self-storage is a lack of perspective or appreciation for the complexity of the business. I think most people believe that if a problem is put in front of them and they understand where they want to go, they can figure out a way to get there. The mistake in self-storage is that you only see the tip of the iceberg. This is a business that used to be very simple, and it still appears simple on the surface, but there's a real tendency to miss the big picture. What self-storage was like 10 or 15 years ago is very different from the business that it is today. Self-storage is now a player in the real estate and investment arena, and a lot of people don't realize how much the market has changed and jumped into that arena without really being aware of how complex the business has become. What we're going to start with is, what is the biggest problem in self-storage? We're not a business like telephones or televisions that we have to have outside challenges to constantly keep up with upgrades in technology. We bring on our problems ourselves. The mistakes that we face are mistakes that we have put ourselves in the position of having to deal with. Overbuilding in our industry is different than overbuilding in other products. You can have the same number of restaurants as we show here in this picture for self-storages, and they can all thrive because they are so diverse and so flexible in what they offer. But the only product that we offer in self-storage is airspace. And in order to sell airspace, you have to have an existing market. The most fundamental principle of self-storage is that you cannot generate a market for it. You cannot create a need where a need does not exist. No matter how great your advertising campaign is, if there is nothing in your garage to put in self-storage, there is no way that you are going to go out and rent a place to put that nothing. Statistically, there's only a certain percentage of the population that has a need. And if you exceed that statistical probability, you face the prospect of oversupply in the market. And that is what we have today. But there are still great opportunities in self-storage. It's just a matter of finding them and doing the studies that you need to do to make sure that you're in the right place. The goal is finding the place that will work. I'm going to go back one slide here. No, I'm not. I'm going to go forward because I can remember what it said. What we are trying to do is we are trying to find a location where the need exists. We're trying to find a place where our construction costs can make us be competitive in the market, and we are trying to find a place where we can maximize our return on investment. In order to do that, we're going to look at the top 5 mistakes in development, construction, and management. But the first thing we're going to do is look at an example because things can be very simple on the surface and actually be more complex. What if there are only 2 facilities within 3 miles of the place where you want to build your self-storage, and both of them are full with waiting lists, and you're looking at a corner property that's on 2 busy streets? Is this a great place to build your self-storage? It could be. But what if the competitors are about 5 years old and they've already been refinanced at really good rates? What if they're in really good condition and they have low rental rates? And what if they were grandfathered in before new sewer and detention pond requirements came in? Maybe it's not going to be such a great investment after all. The other thing that you may have to take into consideration is things that you can't see very easily. What if you check the occupancy during the summer and it's actually a college town where students only rent during the summer? Or if there's a nearby military base that's scheduled for closure next year, or there's a highway expansion that's planned and they're not going to have any on or off ramps near where your location is. If everyone did a thorough and complete site investigation, the biggest problem in self-storage would not exist. Everyone that builds self-storage would have a successful business. So we're going to look at the mistakes that we need to avoid, starting with mistake number 1, which is failure to investigate. Leaping into a project without doing a feasibility study is dangerous. You have no idea what may await. And some mistakes are not easily recoverable from. And if you build in the wrong location, it may be a very long-term recovery and at great cost and effort. So why do people take the risk of jumping in without investigating? The main reason is the cost and the time. The other reason is that if you have never seen anything except the tip of the iceberg, you really have no clue about the perils that may be down there, and you don't understand why it is worth the time and money to do the feasibility studies to avoid making a mistake. I'm going to talk about the 6 basic types of studies that you need to look at to avoid making a mistake in building your self-storage. We're going to look at each one briefly because each one presents a different perspective on the project. First, let's take a look at jurisdiction and code compliance. This is everything that relates to the land itself. Zoning are the local regulations that you are going to have to follow in putting your building together. The availability of utilities is very important because the farther away they are, the longer distance you have to bring them to your property, the more costly it's going to be. Environmental studies may or may not be required, but if they are, they can be very expensive. And if you do find an endangered species, that can cost you. That really is a $40,000 box turtle because that's how much it costs to take care of it before everything was all final and done. Fire regulations are something that you need to look into very carefully because sometimes the fire department and the city don't actually talk together as well as they should. And fire code compliance is signed off ultimately by the fire department. There are also a lot of miscellaneous expenses that you need to discover relating to the land. These costs can be a significant portion of your development budget. Now we're going to look at your location and see what makes it a good site. Convenience is very important to self-storage customers, and they want to have a location where either it is close to their home or it is an area that they have to drive to frequently. I'm going to go back one slide. Nope, I'm going to go forward one slide. I'm sorry. Basically, the things that I wanted to cover is that with regard to, I'm not even touching it now, with regard to traffic generators, these are buildings or businesses that people have to drive past in order to get to your site that makes it convenient for them to stop at your location. And they can help the occupancy of your facility. Even if the population density isn't as high as you would like for it to be, these traffic generators can draw people to your location. The next thing that we're going to talk about is the actual trade area, which is the population density around your facility. It can be densely populated, an urban area, or a rural area. In densely populated areas, people are not willing to drive that far because they don't like traffic. So you're going to draw your customers from an area that's within, say, about 3 miles. In a rural area, people are used to driving long distances, so they're willing to drive further to get to your facility. You need to do a study about the type of people that are in your area and who you think your trade area is going to include. Once you've determined the people that are going to be the potential customers for your facility, you need to look at supply and demand. Supply and demand compares that local population to the currently available product in your area. So let's just assume, for example, that there's 100,000 people in your trade area, but there are also 5 self-storages. If the total combined square footage of all of the other self-storages was 400,000 square feet, that means that in your market there's already 4 square feet per person of self-storage. And in a lot of places that's actually a pretty good number, so that's an indicator that it would be a good place to build. Statistics like this are published annually in the Mini Storage Messenger magazine, and they can help you determine whether or not there's enough population in your area to go ahead and go to the next step in investigating your site. And the next step in investigating your site is a comparison of other facilities to which you plan to buy. Having the supply and demand work is only part of the decision. What if you went to your potential competitors and found out that they were all Class C facilities with low rental rates? What if they're only charging $50 per month for a 10 by 10? How much do you think that you can charge if you go out, or that you'll have to charge actually for a 10 by 10 if you go out and build a nice new facility? Can you really be competitive with your expenses compared to theirs? So maybe you might want to make a decision to pass on this location if you don't know if your rents can be competitive. But you haven't finished the evaluation yet. We need to look at this spot in the complete environment. The demographic analysis is a study of the characteristics of the people within the market. If our low-rent Class C facilities are in a revitalizing neighborhood where there's a second generation of homeowners that are moving in, rebuilding and improving the neighborhood, maybe those competitors are a holdover from the past, and the new economy will now support the rents of a new appealing facility. On the broad scale, people tend to follow patterns. College students rent smaller units, homeowners rent larger units, higher income areas rent climate-controlled units. You need to look at the people that are in your area and compare them with all of the rest of the studies that you are doing. And this demographic analysis, combined with all of the other studies, tell you where and what to build. It's a mistake to build a facility without taking into consideration all of these relevant factors. So why do people do it? Basically, there's two reasons. One is that the investigation is not easy, and it can be expensive. It's a lot of information, and it takes time and effort and lots of research to get it. But unless you have adequate personal knowledge, or get the advice of consultants, or hire someone that is experienced for professional services to help you, you could be making a costly mistake. If you have to spend money and time now, you know what that risk is going to be. But if you don't do it now, it's an unknown risk and cost later. We already know that the biggest problem in self-storage is overbuilding, so it's obvious that some of these people didn't do the investigation that they should have done. You do want to minimize your cost. Cost is important to everybody, and you can hire somebody to do studies for you. But actually, the more that you do on your own, the better you are going to understand your own store and its location. And even if you do hire services, be a little bit skeptical in your decision-making process. Have enough information on your own that you have already done to be able to evaluate the proposals that people are giving you. If you do hire someone to help you with your information, be sure that they offer it to you incrementally. That's the most cost-effective way to make yes or no decisions about whether or not you want to go forward. Don't go out and pay $10,000 or $15,000 for a full-blown study when the first trip to the Planning and Zoning Department may reveal that the City Council has voted a moratorium on self-storage. Be familiar enough with the whole process, find out what you can on your own, and then decide what you need help with. Shop for the services that are going to help you, and you should be able to do it for a quarter of the cost. The next mistake that we're going to talk about is failure to plan to maximize your return on investment. The purpose for being in business is to make money, and the second most costly mistake is not making as much money as you could. Unit mix determines the project's maximum income potential. Rental rates are maximized by the desirability of the facility and the economy in the area, and they're controlled somewhat by the competition. And the design of the design of your facility affects the construction costs and the maximum effective use of space. All of these things affect the long-term value. You also need to have an exit strategy in mind about where you want to be down the road. Are you going to build it to keep it for your kids, or are you going to flip it as soon as you can? All of these things have to be taken into consideration as part of the planning to maximize the return on your investment. If you have an existing location and you're planning to expand, the best way to know what to build is to keep detailed records on all of the calls you receive and gather as much information as possible about your tenants and potential tenants. One of the common misconceptions that managers have is that they need lots of bigger units. We hear that all the time when we're out talking to managers. If I only had more bigger units, I could rent them all day long. But in this example, it shows that that's a perception of a big demand because there's always a waiting list. Really, they would only be able to sell 3 more units, and 7 of them would be empty. The reason that there is a waiting list is not because of a great demand, it's because of a small supply. And you have to look at it from that perspective. There are three ways that people talk about units, and you can have a mistaken communication if you're not talking apples to apples. Financial institutions look at square footage occupancy, or occupancy based on the percentage of square feet rented. It's the best way to get a complete picture of where you actually stand financially. If you have about 30,000 square feet and 300 units, the number of units occupied would be 208, and the number of units occupied was 280. By a percentage, you're 93% occupied. And that's one way that you can look at it, and that's often the way people talk about it. When they say they're 93% occupied, they're usually talking about the number of units. But if those 20 unoccupied units were 5 by 5, on a square foot basis, you're 97% occupied. If those 20 units are 10 by 20s, on a square foot basis, you're only 80% occupied. So that's a big difference in numbers, and the way to look at your investment financially is on that square footage occupied. Your net leasable square footage is how many square feet can make you money. Your occupancy by square foot is how many square feet are making you money. Small units do generate more income than larger units. They take up fewer net leasable square feet, and they make the most money. One of the reasons that there are fewer of the very large units at most facilities is because the smaller units do make more money. But nothing makes money unless it's rented. Remember, the product that we have is airspace. That airspace has to be packaged in usable blocks. You find out what the usable blocks are by demographic and other studies. And then when you're doing your design to maximize your return on investment, you design to the smallest rentable unit sizes to generate the most amount of money. But do not make the mistake of enhancing your financial package by adding a bunch of small units if they're not going to rent. All you're doing is fooling yourself. You get $0 for an unrented unit. Your unit mix has to be real and as profitable as possible. The art and science of unit mix is information, analysis, and understanding of the product to generate the highest potential income in the market. If you have units in an existing facility that aren't renting, investigate the cost and the benefits of reconfiguration. It might not be that expensive. Metal partitions are easily moved. You can buy a few doors. If you have units that are too small or too big and you reconfigure them for your demographics, you can fix that problem and you can increase your return on investment. Another misconception that a lot of people have is whether or not you want to have your facility completely full. If your intention is to maximize your return on investment, the answer is no. It might make you feel successful when your facility is bursting at the seams, but you're leaving money on the table. If you have 400 units and you do a $2 increase, you can make $800 more. This might make some people upset, and they would move out, and you would lose maybe 8 of them, which at $80 a piece, your original cost for the unit, you've lost $640. But if you started out with an increase that brought the rates up to $800, and you take away $640, you're still $160 ahead. You also have, and this is the most important part, 8 more units that you can rent at $82 per month. If you don't have empty units, it's exactly the same as owning a store with empty shelves. There is money to be made if you stock up. By raising rates reasonably, you can increase the affluence of your clientele, and you can keep stock on the shelves. It's a business. It might make you feel good to have it full, but if you keep a business perspective, always keeping a few units available is going to make you more money. Another thing that can make you feel good but actually lose money is building to impress. The Maserati and the Volkswagen both get you to where you want to go. The question is, how much money do you want to have left in your pocket when you get there? If you want to maximize your return on investment, You want to build what is going to attract customers in your neighborhood without any unnecessary fluff. That is going to be the best long-term investment. And you should always build with the possibility of sale in mind. Even if that's not your plan, you need to build within your marketplace for the future possibility of sale. That brings us to our third mistake, and another difficulty that developers have in particular is estimating cost. Costs fall into three general categories. 2 out of the 3 are below the waterline, and you can't see them. What you cannot see is the greatest portion of the cost of a new product. Soft costs and underground costs. We're going to try and forward that slide one more time. Soft costs and underground costs are where the greatest mistakes are made. You can see the building, you can estimate the building, but it's the other costs that are going to be more of a surprise to you if you haven't planned ahead. And cost is the first thing that everybody wants to know. When people call and they have a question for us, usually the first question is, how much does it cost? And I can give you some general numbers. I mean, I can tell you that a typical project of 75 to 100,000 square feet runs from $3 to $7 million. I can tell you that slab and above is $38 to $53 a square foot. Or I can tell you that a metal building package is $6 to $14 a square foot. And that range is way too wide to give you any help at all. And I know that. The difficulty is that without evaluating the features that you are looking for or knowing what the location is, it's very difficult, if not impossible, to give you any kind of a different answer. The location of the facility and the design of the facility means everything. But we can give you a little bit of a perspective on what some of the cost relationships are. Above ground costs are the only ones that can be roughly estimated without investigating the site. But even those costs, the material and labor costs change depending upon the economy. The geographic location affects the cost of both. And the farther out your projection time is of when you want to build, the more likely the numbers are to be wrong. We can say that slabs are usually about 12.5%, metal buildings are about 35%, doors and hallways are about 12.5%, HVAC and electrical are about 7% each on the total cost of a building. But that still leaves 30 to 40% of the cost in other expenses. And it's really hard to nail those down. A security system alone can cost anywhere from $35,000 to $140,000. If you try to base your budget on a few telephone calls to vendors without providing them with specifics, you are leaping into uncharted waters. You will not get a true picture, and it will be a mistake. Underground work is hard to pin down because every location is so very, very different, and it's a very expensive part of most jobs. Site work, water control, and utilities are all considered part of underground work. And land can be deceptively flat and actually have several feet of rise and fall. So you can't just look at it and think that this will be simple. You always have to have a survey before you can really estimate what site costs are going to be. And you'll probably have to have soil samples as well. Another big issue is water control. Retention and detention ponds and storm drainage can be big-ticket items. These are actual storm drainage pipes that we were required to put in at a self-storage facility. Now, everybody knows that a self-storage facility shouldn't require anything that big, but governing authorities dictate what fits into their master plan, not just what pertains to your site. Sometimes they'll share with the costs, but you never know what they're going to require until you actually investigate. The distance that you have to travel to hook up to fire lines, water lines, gas lines, and electricity can really have a significant effect on your underground costs as well. The farther away these utilities are, the more expensive it's going to be to hook up to them. And your civil engineer is the person who should tell you and is responsible for providing you with the information about where these utilities are. They should also let you know if you're going to be responsible for relocating anything, because if telephone lines or electrical lines or anything like that have to be relocated, you are responsible for the cost. The underground costs have to do with the physical property. Soft costs are the other things that add to the expense of doing a complete project. Soft costs are everything that gives you the right and the ability to use the land for the intended purpose, not the actual cost of the land or its construction. These costs can be complicated to figure out, and there are a wide variety of them, and that is part of the purpose of doing an economic feasibility study to discover what all of those costs can total, and that is our next topic. What is economic feasibility? Feasibility really is just a study. It's a format. It's a picture in numbers of what the estimated expenses are going to be, the estimated income, future projections, and value assessments. This picture helps you to determine whether or not the project will actually make the money you want it to make. Feasibility studies are a report that you need to do. They don't have to have the same names or be the same line items or be so formal. But each report represents an underlying concept that can affect the profitability of your business. There's a lot of free information available on the website that can help you when looking at what these should be, and the Small Business Administration offers financial classes in all of these categories. The last consideration in estimating costs is the amount of time that it takes. To say time is money is never more true than in construction. Oftentimes people start out planning only to the day that they open the door, and that's a mistake, because money is going out until the day that you open the door, but the day that you get that CO, you are opening a facility that has no tenants. You also have to have money called lease carry money to carry you over during the time that you are leasing up until the point where you break even. Mistake number 4 deals with construction itself, and it's underestimating the role of the general contractor. Some of the most costly mistakes in construction are made before construction even begins. The intention of being your own general contractor is to save yourself money. And if you have some construction experience, you may feel that this is a good way to save a considerable chunk. The mistake is made when you think that because you have done other types of construction, like housing development or strip centers, that self-storage construction should be easy. But actually, self-storage construction is an environment that may be very different from the environment that you have come from. You've probably heard the saying, there are 100 yards on a football field, but it's a game of inches. Metal buildings are a game of inches as well. Two of the most important considerations are roof height and drainage. And all of the rest of the building falls in between, so you have to work within those parameters. Why are self-storage roofs nearly always flat? It's because the whole interior is made up of those small boxes. And those small boxes have to go all the way to the roof so that tenants can't get from one location to another. But the roof has to have enough of a slope to shed water. So you have to have a pitch of 1/4 on 12. If you add just 1/4 inch more, that's going to add 5% to the cost of your materials. And everything that you put inside the building has to fit within those parameters and that restricted space. The other really important factor is drainage. There's only the height of the brick lug from the floor of from the driveway to the floor of the unit. That's because people have to take dollies in and out and move stuff in and out constantly. But that means that the drive can't have any water backup at all. It has to be graded to accommodate the maximum rainfall or precipitation for that area. Everything about self-storage is designed specifically for self-storage, and you have to be aware of the underlying concepts in order to be able to avoid mistakes. There are also a lot more trades involved in self-storage than most people realize, trades that you don't even think of, like erosion control and pest control. The number of trades multiplies the difficulty of keeping track of everything. Everyday issues such as delivering materials and having storage areas for all the materials and having to move things back and forth, all of these things have to be tracked for each individual subcontractor. And problems between subcontractors come up. What happens when the mason's forklift runs into the metal building contractor's pier? Or what if the mason fails his mortar test and the metal crew is stuck waiting and spending time on hotel bills and food while the masonry is redone? Resolving conflict equitably is a continuing job of the general contractors. If there's an office and a residence at your facility, all of the subcontractors that are required to build an apartment are required there as well. You can easily have 20 to 30 subcontractors on a job, and two things govern all of their activities: the plans that state what is to be built and the scope of work that states who does what. You may have one contractor to do the slabs, another to do the drives, a third for the sidewalk and curbs, or they could all be one subcontractor. It's the general contractor who, on the scope of work, figures out who is going to be done, who is going to be doing what. There are many places where trades overlap each other. In this picture, I'm showing a corner where there's brick, there's metal, there's going to be stucco put on top of it, and there's going to be paint on top of that. The question is, who's going to have final responsibility for making sure that there is no leak in that corner? That is what the scope of work is for making sure that there is nothing missed and that the building is put together with all of the trades cooperating effectively. That is a big important part of what a general contractor does. And if they don't plan effectively, you can have problems like this water well problem. They shouldn't have drilled the water well after the building was up and after the drives were in. Things that you don't think about and plan ahead for can cost time and money. Another thing that the general contractor handles is paperwork. Subcontractor stability is really important, and they have to be investigated both on their work and on their financial stability before you hire them. You don't want them to run out of credit for materials halfway through the project and end up having to front the material, front them the money for materials. They also have to have the required insurance that is required both by law and by lenders. And you have to keep up with the process of payment and lien releases to make sure that your job stays completely free of liens. The job of the general contractor is coordinating all of these different efforts and all of these different things, keeping everyone's attention and everyone's effort pointed in the right direction. And this is a full-time job. If you don't do it wisely, mistakes can be very costly. It only takes one supplier not being paid to file a lien or one uninsured accident to shut down a job. The consequences of underestimating the complexity of the role of the GC can be very serious. There's a saying, you can avoid reality, but you cannot avoid the consequences of reality. The reality is that you need to be willing to take the time and effort to plan well and learn the process before starting a job on your own as your own GC, or you need to hire a qualified GC. You are simply taking a huge risk if you don't truly know what you're doing. This is an iceberg sightseeing ship that ran aground on an iceberg and turned on its side. A little bit of experience just isn't quite enough. That brings us to mistake number 5, having the appropriate perspective in management. Self-storage customers are primarily people in transition. Some change in their lives or in their business has created a problem regarding their possessions, and the service that we provide is a secure airspace where they can keep their goods. So we go out and intentionally hire self-storage managers that are warm, outgoing problem solvers because we want to serve those customers' needs. The problem comes in if they lose perspective and they go too far. If I were to ask an audience, what is a manager's job? I would get a wide variety of answers because each individual has their own perception of what is most important in their job. And the answers would be all over the board. They would be leasing units or customer service, marketing, auctions. But the one thing that is really the manager's job is to make money for the owner. All of those other things are important duties, but the manager only has one job, and they seldom think of it that way. They often have a more emotional perspective. In fact, some managers behave as though they are the tenant's buddy, and they are protecting the tenant from the owner and the owner's rules. Also, managers can have a problem because of their extreme autonomy. Sometimes they become self-guided, and they'll say things like, well, the owner says this, but I can do this because I'm the good guy. This is because they have lost perspective on what their real role is. The manager's job is to protect the owner's interests, and the way they protect the owner's interest is by following law and procedure, by having a professional demeanor at all times, and by protecting the property's value. In order to do that, they have to look at everything through the eyes of a business person and not from an emotional perspective. They have to understand that leases and other documents are contracts. They are binding legal obligations on both sides, and it's not a personal decision or choice as to what they enforce or don't enforce. Sometimes managers will forget that legal perspective and just highlight where they want people to sign instead of explaining the whole lease and going through. Or maybe they'll skip the parts that they're afraid the tenants might find objectionable because they don't want to lose the lease. They can often even say, well, don't worry about that part of it, we'll get it later, instead of taking the time and making the customer take the time to fill out everything adequately. They underestimate the legal consequences of their performance. Managers can have empathy, but they should not indulge in sympathy. When they do, when they get sympathetic, they start making bad decisions. They start waiving fees and taking partial payments and granting access to people that aren't on leases. It's really important that managers keep the right perspective and understand the consequences of their actions. Seemingly small things like telling the customer they have to buy their own insurance and making them sign a notice that they've been told they have to buy their own insurance can have a huge impact if the unexpected does happen. Procedures are not options. They are the essence of your business, and they are the barrier against mistakes. Owners actually have some of the same perspective challengers in dealing with their employees, especially when they have been working together for a long time. And you can be a kind-hearted, good employer, but you have to keep one step removed. Employees must remain employees rather than friends. It is a business obligation on your part that you check their work, no matter how long they've been there. It's not being nosy, it's not mistrust, it is your obligation as an owner. And you have to keep that business perspective on your part in order to expect your employees to keep that business perspective on their part. They should expect you to check their work as a normal part of the business routine. And you actually have to do it, whether you want to or not. Otherwise, you are leaving yourself open for mistakes. The next to last thing I want to just mention briefly is maintenance by observation. If you can see a problem with your property, your customer can see it too. properties run down without scheduled maintenance, without scheduled preventive maintenance. It's really important to take the time to develop a routine and be sure the managers follow it. As an example, a manager might think that cleaning out a unit after a tenant has moved out is sweeping the floor. But from a preventive maintenance perspective, cleaning out a unit after a tenant's moved out is sweeping the floor, lubricating the doors, wiping down the lock mechanism, replacing worn weather stripping, touching up the painting, checking for tears in insulation, and spraying for insects. You as the owner need to be sure that you plan and organize what the manager does for the long-term value of your property. And I can't quit without mentioning the big ticket items. Real property taxes, liability insurance, employee carrying costs. These are your most expensive items, and you need to fight your taxes every single time. You can save a lot of money by protesting your taxes. You need to shop your liability insurance because insurance companies are not the same. And you must be certain that your tenants carry insurance. Also, don't be afraid to talk to your employees about your expenses and their wages. Sometimes it might be more important for an employee to be able to visit their grandkids and have a little bit more time off than to have the highest salary. So negotiate with them and see what works for both of you. You need to be sure to include the employer taxes and vacation and sick time in your budget because someone has to replace your manager during those hours, and that is going to be double wages for you. Higher costs mean that you have to charge higher rates or it will decrease your profit. So you just really need to keep a tab on all of your expenses, especially these big ticket items, and minimize the cost wherever you can. Maintaining a well-informed perspective of the big picture and all of these things that I have mentioned lets you see the potential mistakes before they happen. And if you see them, you can avoid them. That concludes this portion of the presentation. I hope it gave you a few ideas on how to approach self-storage and avoid some of the most costly mistakes. I'm going to turn it back over to Poppy now for our question and answer period.
Great. Thank you very much, Donna, for all of that great information. We have quite a few questions today, so we'll try and get through as many as we can. The first one is, how can I generate additional tenants in this downturned economy?
That is difficult. The economy that we are facing right now is difficult for everybody. There can be a tendency for people to start cutting rates and offering big discounts, and that really just has a cumulative effect because all of your competitors do the same thing and everybody's rates go down, and it really doesn't solve the problem. The problem we have is that there has to be a need in order for tenants to want to move in. And if they just don't have the money, they just don't have the money. I wish I had a better answer. And actually, I will turn that question over to Ann Perron, who manages Joshua Management and deals with this issue on a day-to-day basis. And I can have Ann get back a more informed and a more comprehensive answer.
Wonderful. This may be another question that we want to shoot over to Ann, but we'll address it as well. The question is, I constructed RV storage 2 years ago, and I'm still having trouble filling the spaces. There is no other RV storage around. I have advertised and approached several retailers. Help.
Do you understand that question?
Poppy?
Yes, so the question is, what what can they do to fill those spaces, those RV and boat spaces?
If they have said that they approached the retailers, I'm assuming they mean the people that sell boat and RV spaces, which it would be the first thing that I would do, and maybe even try and work out some kind of a deal with them, saying that they will give that particular retailer a discount on their spaces. Boat and RV is a unique type of self-storage, and if there isn't a demand for it, I would honestly suggest that they consider perhaps changing it to some other type of storage. If the lack of demand is a prolonged lack of demand, and they don't think it's just related to the economy, you can change your self-storage type and make it enclosed or something that would be more appealing to people.
Okay, wonderful. Next question, is there a way to determine climate control demand, such as square foot per person or per household data?
Climate control demand is somewhat related to what your competition offers. And also, I mean, there are areas in which climate control just really isn't that necessary and it isn't offered. So it depends somewhat on location. You need to be competitive in your marketplace. I don't know of any particular statistic, and Poppy, you might, or you might know where to direct them for particular statistics on that. I do know that higher economic areas do rent more climate control than lower economic areas. But as far as statistics particularly related on a square foot basis, I'm not aware of where to go to get that. However,
I'm not either. I know that we do have information on climate control as far as occupancy and rental rates and that type of information in the almanac, but as far as demand, I just don't think that information is out there.
Yeah, I mean, in the northern states and in the southern states, they have a lot more climate control than they do through the central states. And I could have Mike take a look at that question too, since he's the authority on putting together unit mixes.
Wonderful. Next question we have is there a source to find out what the population density is within 3 miles of a site being considered?
Yes, actually there are a number of sources. There are subscriptions that you can purchase that tell you population densities for a variety of areas. You can look at postal counts. You can even get that information oftentimes from the local Better Business Bureau or the city. So there's really quite a few ways that you can find out what population densities are in a particular area. Postal counts is one of the best ones. If you go by census statistics, if you have people that maybe have 2 homes, they're only counted in 1 home, and there are a lot of people that go between residences, and those are counted in the postal counts, but they are not taken into consideration in the census, and they only do the census once every 10 years, so that information gets outdated.
Okay, next question is, why do tenants need to sign an insurance waiver?
Liability insurance on your property is only for your physical property. You should never try and insure the contents of units. You have absolutely no idea what the tenant is putting in their unit or how valuable it is. You must have them carry insurance on their own unit for the contents of that unit so that you have no liability. And that should be part of your lease. It should be part of your lease that the tenant is required to carry insurance.
Okay, next question is, can you give us some ideas for couples who want to begin a career in self-storage management?
First thing I would do is I would read everything that I can find in the magazines and on the website and get a full and clear picture of what the self-storage job entails, and be sure that that is something that you want to do. I know that there are a lot of articles that have been written about that. Ann Parham is the person who hires all of the managers for the Joshua Management projects, and I would suggest that they actually get in touch with her and have her give them some details of what it actually entails. In fact, I think she's written an article specifically on that, on husbands and wives working together in self-storage. And you can find that article on our website, the Parham Group website.
All right, wonderful.
Which is oneresource.com.
Okay, next question. Should we get a copy of the tenant's insurance policy?
That really isn't necessary. If you have the tenant sign on a, yeah. Poppy, you have a brochure about your insurance.
We
right?
do. We have
And on
tenant.
that,
We have
yes,
tenant
and
one
on
brochure.
that brochure, there's a place where the tenant can sign saying, yes, I received that brochure and I understand that I am required to carry insurance. And that is what we use at all of our locations. As long as you have something that the tenant has signed that says that they understand that they are required to carry insurance, then you do not have to have a copy of their policy.
Perfect, and I can certainly get that information for anyone who wants it if they'd like to email me as well on the tenant insurance program. Next question. Do you see more opportunity given today's economy to allow for a broader use of one storage facility for business owners to operate a business location or warehouse?
Okay, let me think about that for a moment. It can be much less expensive to operate a business. If you have an office warehouse type situation, it can be much less expensive for an individual to operate a business out of a self-storage than it would be for them to have their own standalone building. And that is an opportunity that people could pursue. I can see how in this economy that could actually be an advantage.
Okay, great. Next question. As far as leasing paperwork is concerned, what is the #1 mistake I should watch for?
The manager not signing at the bottom.
Okay. Are there
Actually,
any others?
that's what so yes, I will tell you some of the others. But what happens is that as the manager is going through the lease and they're explaining everything, and the tenant is going through and filling out all of the details, they get down to the bottom, the tenant signs the lease, and the manager starts talking to them about the self-storage facility, and the manager actually forgets to sign the lease. So that's one of the things that happens. It's important that you do have all of the information on their driver's license and that it is accurate and that you look at it. That's an important thing to be sure that you have on there. Tenant access, if they want to have anyone else have access to their unit, it has to be stated on there who can have access. And it's a difficult problem because sometimes situations come up where they need to have a son or a daughter or somebody come in and get stuff out of the unit. And if they're not on the lease, if they haven't been authorized to go in, then the manager isn't allowed to let them in.
Okay. I think we have time for one more question here. And let's see, the next one is, why wouldn't people that can afford a higher rent for a Class A facility choose to rent at that facility?
I would think they would unless there was an alternative site that they felt was as safe, as well cared for. It might not look as nice, but if they can get this, what people are really looking for is they're looking for their goods to be conveniently located in a safe place that they feel is being taken care of. And even if you have extra money, you don't necessarily go out and spend it on something that just looks good when you can get the same value spending less for the same actual service.
Okay. I think, Donna, we might have time for one more.
Okay,
What is your perspective on build versus buy? I'm considering both approaches for getting into the self-storage business and have not decided whether to try and buy an existing facility or just build one.
In today's market, I believe that there are bargains out there. And if you can get financing, financing is going to be the difficult thing either way. Financing has done a complete flip-flop in the last year or so as far as how much the banks are willing to put forward on a project. I know that there are bargains out there right now, because we are getting calls from banks about taking over management on facilities that they are getting back. So I know the bargains are out there. But we also have a really good article on our website that Mike has written. That I think the title of it is actually Build versus Buy. And it goes through all of the things that you can look at to compare those two scenarios.
All right, wonderful. Well, thank you very much, Donna, for answering all of those questions. If you have submitted questions and we haven't gotten to them, please look for Donna and the rest of the Param team to answer them in the near future. We'd like to thank everyone for attending, and we certainly hope we've provided useful information to assist you in your self-storage endeavors. You will receive an email by Monday with a link to the archived presentation as well as a special offer, so make sure you watch your inbox for this email. And last but certainly not least, for more information about our upcoming webinars, please visit our website at ministoragemessenger.com. We have a great lineup of exciting topics scheduled for September, October, and November, so you'll want to check those out and sign up as soon as possible. Thank you to everyone for attending, and have a wonderful rest of the day.